Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. I gotta tell people, I am now part of the Podcast Playground. It's a great network. Go check them out, podcastplayground.com. They have some great shows on there. And, we have a great guest today. I talked to a lot of actors, and a lot of actors, if in their career they're on one hit TV show, they're really happy. And, if they have more than one hit TV show, they're really happy. Now, if they have two really good, they might have a good show and a show that sucks, but if they have two shows at the same time, which my guest has, they have to be really happy because he was on Spin City, which Alan Ruck's been on the show, and he was on Arliss, which both Jim Turner and Robert Wool have been on the show, and they were two great shows, and he was on them simultaneously. So we have a great guest, and it's Michael Boatman. How you doing, Michael?
Hey, good, Steve. How are you?
Good. And we're going to talk about that. It just amazes me when I look at your IMDb that you were on those two shows, and we'll get to that, at the same time. That's an actor's dream.
It was, and even better, one was in New York, one shot in New York, Spin City, and Arliss shot in L.A., so it never got hectic. Also, it was really a kind of a kismet, perfect sort of combination of events, because Arliss shot in the summer when Spin City was on hiatus for the summer, so it was just kind of perfect. And, 4 kids, which are always expensive for many different reasons. My 2 youngest are in college right now, and so, we're still, chugging away. But I also, having The Good Fight finish in 2022, I think. It's still on and streaming and everything. But it's just funny how that weird little synchronicity, Arliss, Spin City, people still talk about it. And apparently, Heather Locklear, I'm sure now it's done, it's, more common, but apparently at the time, I was told, my managers always told me, you and Heather Locklear, because I guess she was on, I don't know, Dynasty and TJ Hooker at the same time. Boy, am I dating myself with those shows. But listen, it was great. Both of those shows, I made lifelong friends, and they were just fun. In both regards. You said Jim Turner and Robert have been on your podcast, and Sandra Oh, who's still a friend. Jim Turner's still a friend. Robert, I occasionally see him or he'll call, and everyone from Spin City are pretty much, we're still friendly. I see Michael. I just saw Michael a couple of weeks ago. I saw Charlie. Charlie Sheen became one of my best friends from Spin City. Alan Ruck and I are very close, and I'm actually staying right now at the moment because I'm in a transitional phase, moving to the city. I'm staying in Richard Kind's apartment because
Richard's been on the show too. So
Oh, has he?
Yeah.
Hey, he is a character. He's out of town right now, and he knew that I was moving and going through, looking for stuff, and he said, "What? Stay in my place. Why don't you just stay in? You're an idiot." Everybody that knows Richard Kind does Richard Kind.
So, you've had this really long career. When did you know you wanted to be an actor? Was that as a kid? Did it just, boom, hit you? Or what was it like? Because I had a career in comedy for a while, and I didn't really get into it until after I got out of, I always sort of knew, but when I was in college, I got my degree to make my parents happy. Then I started doing it. But I sort of knew at a younger age I wanted to get into this area. When did you know that you wanted to become an actor?
Originally, as a kid, I wanted a career in the sciences. I loved the ocean. I was, for the longest time, I was, I'm going to be a marine biologist. And then at another point, I decided and I still do. I'm fascinated by the ocean. I'm fascinated by astronomy. I wanted to be an astronomer, and due to a strange sort of situation in my high school at the time, basically, my counselor at that time saying, "Oh, you can't do those things. Your math scores aren't good. Go to the military." And at that time, kids really, or at least I did. Here's authority. Here is my counselor saying, "You can't do this dream." And so, for a moment, I didn't know what to do because I had been telling myself that that's who I am. I'm a science guy. I want to, do science. And it wasn't until, so I floundered around for a while in high school. And then I think my junior year, there's a lot of serendipity in this particular story. For some strange reason, I don't know if it was puberty kicked in, I don't know, but I sort of suddenly discovered that I had a sense of humor. And I started to use it. And so people started saying, hey, you're funny. And I think because I was a shy kid and I was, classic nerd and all that stuff, I had a facility for, jokes, making, doing voices, crazy stuff that kids like me do. But during the span of 1 week, I had 3 friends say to me, you're funny, you should try out for the school play. The third time I heard it, I thought, maybe I should try out for the school play. People keep telling me this. So I did. I had no idea what I was doing. And I got a part. It was a musical, children's theater musical called The Incredible Jungle Journey of Fenda Maria, which to this day I have no idea what it was about. But and I had one of the leading roles. But there was something infectious. First of all, I found my people. I hadn't really had people, that's what, today my kids all say, I found my people. That back then, I guess we said, we had friends or like minds. Theater departments, for some reason, high school theater departments, and even in the college level, always tend to draw disparate elements from, the rest of the institution. So you can have the football guy, you can have the physics A student, and they all either want to be actors or they want to be. It's not that they want to be actors; it's that they enjoy the process. And some guys are technical. Anyway, all of that led to me finding friends, and I think that was the biggest thing. And once you start hanging around with a group, you're interested in what the group is interested in. So I did plays, and we had competitions back then where high schools would compete against each other for drama or comedy scenes and things like that. And I did well in that world. When I got to college, I was a communications major, which I always say is the most nebulous major of all time.
I was business management, same thing. It's just one of those bullshit. No one ever follows it. Okay. It's the same thing. Like, what is business management? I don't know. I want to get a degree. That's what it comes out.
What does it mean, right? But I had some scholarships there based on acting. The head of the department at the time. Saw me in a play somewhere, and hey, if you come to Western Illinois University, we'll give you some money. So that was a big thing. And I think I changed majors halfway through my first year because I was now totally bitten by the bug, by the acting bug. And I think my plan at that point became I was going to graduate. I was maybe going to get a master's. But before settling down, my plan was I was going to, tour the Midwest, regional theater, and do it until I couldn't take it anymore, and then settle down at some college town and teach. And that to me was great. It sounded great. I love theater to this day. I can go to a high school play, and I am absolutely enraptured. I'm sitting there, and my kids always laugh at me, if for one or other reason they happen to be with me. Dad, it's a high school play. And I go, shut up. We don't say shut up in my house. But, so I think around that time, so it would have been sophomore year, something like that, I realized, I want to do this. But I had no idea about TV, movies, because at that point for me, those weren't actors. That wasn't what I thought of as acting. I thought acting was on the stage. So that where I ended up was in a weird way kind of totally out of left field for me.
So that was you wanted to be in the theater. So when you graduate, do you go to New York and say this is where theater is, or do you stay? Because Chicago had a scene too. Chicago had the improv scene in Second City, and TV shows were shot there. But you weren't into that yet. So what was your plan when you graduated? Did you want to go to Chicago, or did you want to go to New York?
I wanted to go to Chicago because, just as you said, Chicago's a great theater town. And at that time, I graduated in the, in the 80s. But at that time, Chicago was hot for actors because, Steppenwolf guys were becoming famous. Gary Sinise, Gary Cole, who later became a friend of mine from The Good Wife, John Malkovich, all those guys were becoming stars, movie stars. And so I thought, hey, I'll go to Chicago and do theater there. But it didn't last long. I think I lived in Chicago essentially for the summer after graduation, and just entering in fall, I believe, of that year, I wound up getting my first movie job, which was Hamburger Hill.
Now, how did that come about? I mean, because, once again, it's funny. There's so many people that concentrate strictly on TV and movies. For you, it was the other way around. So how did Hamburger Hill come up when you really, it wasn't in your bandwidth, I'm guessing?
Not at all. Not at all. I had gotten a summer job working with a casting director, one of the biggest casting directors at the time, Jane Brody, who I think has since retired. But she came to my university, saw me in a play, and kind of gave me, this is another one of those serendipitous moments where she kind of pulled me to the side, at one point she gave me the sort of, hey kid, when you get to Chicago, give me a call, which is certainly encouraging. And so I did, and she needed an assistant was what she really needed. But she also really liked my acting. She liked me as an actor, and she told me. As a weird result, we worked on films as, she was a casting director. And now I was just an assistant. I was handing her resumes and, setting up appointments and that kind of thing. But one day, and this would have been like July, around that time, June and July, she came in and she said, hey, Boatman, there's this really good war movie that's auditioning, and I got you an audition, because she wasn't auditioning it, but one of the other big casting directors. There used to be three big casting directors in Chicago, and they were all named Jane Brody, mine, and the other two Jane's names escape me at the moment. But so she said, go get over to Jane whichever's office and audition for this part. Here are the sides, and it was this character Motown. Okay, kind of a middle class but wisecracking kind of kid. And I walked over to the audition. I had no idea what was happening, because again, I didn't know movies, TV. That wasn't at all in my bandwidth, as you said. So I just sort of meander over, and I have the audition, read the scene, and it seemed fine. I go back to work at Jane Brody's, and I think maybe two weeks later, she called, and I was off that week or something. And she called and said, you got that movie, you got that Hamburger Hill movie. And I kind of went nuts, because it was just, I hadn't been in Chicago long enough to become bitter or competitive, with other actors. That would come later. But I just sort of felt like a kid who, lucked into this thing, and which also, though, led to, when I actually got to the Philippines, which was where that movie was shot. Now I'm looking at Courtney Vance, Don Cheadle, Steven Weber from So Many Things, Wings. Now, none of us had been in anything at that point. We were all of us pretty much fresh out of whatever drama school we'd gone to. But I was intimidated because here's this little kid from Chicago. And I've always told people Chicago is a big city with a small town
mentality.
not thought process.
Mentality?
Yeah, mentality. In a good way, So I'm looking at these, and then people, Cheadle had come from L.A., yeah, and Weber was from, Dylan McDermott were from New York, and I thought, oh my God, these guys are real actors. What am I doing here? They're going to find out I'm no good, and they're going to, my first introduction to fraudster syndrome or something like that. But we bonded. It was a great, we spent 4 months in the jungles of the Philippines filming this movie. We did actual basic training at a marine base, Subic Bay, which I think has closed down since, outside Manila, and we bonded and became and again I met lifelong friends there. Great experience, and then so for 4 months I was there. So when I got back to Chicago, now I'm sorry that thing just came over me. Now I had to get an agent. Again, Jane Brody says, go over to Harrice Davidson, talk to her. I told her all about you, kind of thing. And what I didn't know at the time is, it's easier to get representation in Hollywood when you have a job that they can cite, whether it already happened months ago or, well, this kid's obviously serious and he's in this movie and, we can, and so Harrice Davidson, a big agent in Chicago, offered to represent me, and I said sure, and things kind of took off from there. So a long way around your question, answering your question. I didn't even stay in Chicago very long because I went to New York because my agent at the time said you got to go to New York because that's there's just more opportunities there.
Now
I went to LA.
I was going to say, did China Beach, because China Beach came, which is another military, which is just funny how, when you said, if you have work, and especially back then, if they saw the type, like, oh, he can do military. So did China Beach happen very quickly when you moved?
Very quickly. I was in New York for a year, and I did a couple of things off Broadway. I was taking classes. I had I had a day job. So I could audition, I had a midnight shift. I used to guard New York Telephone buildings. Do you remember New York Telephone?
Yeah.
That company? I don't even know what happened to them. But I did that so I could, audition during the day. And, about a year after I got there, my agent at the time called and said, there's this TV pilot for a Vietnam War, and at that point, there was a moment where the Vietnam War, I guess it takes, maybe someone told me it takes 20 years for us to process these great sort of national upheavals, and when we do process it, suddenly we all seem to process it at the same time. So suddenly there were just tons and tons of Vietnam projects going around that I auditioned for. I played a wounded Vietnam vet on an episode of Quantum Leap with Scott Bakula. But the audition for China Beach came, and they liked me. They flew me out to L.A. to test for the network. I'm laughing because, and I don't remember who this actor ever turned out to be, but I remember sitting there again. Here's me. Wow, what am I doing here? This is unbelievable. Nobody seems to know that I'm a fraud. And there was one other actor in contention for the role of Beckett. Samuel Beckett was the character, and he must have sensed that I was insecure because he came out of his audition. He went in first. And he walked past, and he literally said something to me like, you shouldn't even bother to go in, man.
What a dick. What a dick.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish I could remember who it was. This is 30 years ago plus, 30 plus. Because I'm pretty sure whoever he was, I think he went on to become, known from other projects. I just can't remember who it was, but again, my heart sank because, oh, wow, this guy, he must really know. Then I go in and I have the audition, and it goes great. And I walk out thinking, well, it was I stayed in a hotel for a weekend. They flew me to LA. Well, maybe one day I'll come to LA. That could be interesting. You got the job. They told me that night, before I even left, you got the job. And back then, and even today, a little, I still have enough of that kid in me sometimes to marvel at how fortunate I've been and how varied my career has been, all things that I certainly worked for and worked hard for. But there's enough of that kid left in me to sort of, and be very grateful about really every single moment of it. But back then when I was young and spry, I went crazy. I jumped, I might have done a backflip. At Warner Brothers, in the actual office, I was, I called my mother, Ma, I'm on this TV show. I can't believe it. It's a pilot. And, and then we did the pilot. It was another great experience. I met Dana Delaney and Marg Helgenberger and Brian Wimmer and the cast, Robert Picardo, Bob Picardo. And started doing this show that I immediately fell in love with because it took a different tack. This was about the nurses at mobile hospitals during Vietnam. So Dana Delaney was, of course, the star. Colleen McMurphy, the nurse, and I was the guy who ran the morgue and had to talk. And I talked to the dead bodies and. I was the guy and I got a little obsessed. They called me Dr. Death in the pilot, and I was kind of an outcast, and just a great part.
Now, what is that like? You had the movie on one of your first auditions, and now in a quick time, you're a regular on a network series. And I try to tell people, networks were different back then. Even if it was a low-rated show, millions of people watched it because there wasn't. Yeah. I mean, there was. I think HBO was new, or if it hasn't, nothing was around. So, people watched it a lot. So what's that like for you? Because as you said, you're going through this, you still this little bit of a fraud syndrome, because I think they're going to find out. Do you sit there and all of a sudden, when you get on the set, go, well, you know what? I have to be good because I'm on a network TV show.
I didn't. I think my self-esteem at that point in my life was pretty low. First of all, and I the way I sort of grew up was, hey, take it easy, slow down, Bugs Bunny, don't get ahead, don't get above yourself, kind of thing. So again, which all sort of combined for me in this way of sort of don't make too much noise because someone's going to find out. But I think what I've loved about my career, apart from the great roles that I've been able to play, comedy and drama, is I'm always drawn in, like I was even in high school, by the people. Dana Delaney, we all became friends. We still communicate. That show was 1987 to 1991, I think. When it ended, it was 3 seasons, but and that always made it fun. The chemistry on the set, I really responded to, and I've also been incredibly lucky. I've yet to work on a set where, there's a positive, there's a negative vibe. You hear stories about actors misbehaving, and I've been incredibly fortunate to have been able to avoid that. But I had fun. I was 23, I think. And that was the start. And that was sort of when, of course, I started, people started recognizing me on the street and, hey, you're the guy from, and Hamburger Hill came out somewhere in between that. in that period. Hamburger Hill came out in 1987, I believe, and it was swamped by Platoon, which came out like 2 months previous, and Full Metal Jacket, which was 6 months before. You know what I mean? There was just a wave of Vietnam movies that all got, released around the same time. But when I I can actually remember the first time someone came up to me on the street. I was in New York. Hamburger Hill was out in the theaters, and a woman said, "Hey, aren't you in Hamburger Hill?" My reaction was, "How'd you know that? How do you? What? Do I know you? Who are you? Who are you? You were really good. Oh my God, what a great movie! My dad was in Vietnam, and he loved it." And suddenly, I sort of realized, oh, this can happen. Yeah. I mean, so like I said, the whole idea of being, famous or well-known or whatever from TV and movies, that had never occurred to me back in the day. I was a theater kid. And that's what I always thought, what my career would turn out to be.
Well, now, when China Beach ends, where are you mentally? Because, as you said, it's you're young. And, when you think about it, when you graduate college, when you're at that age, 23, you said 24, you get out of college, you get that first job. And, no one really lasts the whole time for their job. So you're growing, you're going, whoa. My first job out of college, I sold fax machines. That's how old I am. I would have sold copiers, but I drove a Fiero, and the copier would have fit in a Fiero.
Machine.
But
of course.
But so when that job is done, what are you looking at to do in your career? Or are you just saying, you know what, I just had a hit show. I was on a show. I don't have to jump right now because you probably made some good money. So you're sitting there and going, what did you want to plan? Because you ended up being on the Jackie Thomas show, which, was that just something that came out of the blue, or what was your plan when China Beach ended?
When China Beach ended, first of all, I was devastated. For all of your viewers, I can plug that they have finally released an unbelievable compilation on, and I'm sure it's streaming now. Because the show was never really went into syndication until way longer, than it should have. And the big problem was all the music, because all the Diana Ross and the Supremes. I mean, the music that show was set to were the hits from the '60s, and Warner Brothers at the time did not want to have to pay all those royalties. So the fact that the show had all these songs kind of held us back in terms of appearing in syndication, right? But I got over it, and by now I've understood that I'm a professional actor. This is what I do. So what's next? And also around that time, I started getting offers, that I hadn't auditioned for necessarily. Hey, somebody wants you on Quantum Leap, for instance, or producers of the show saw you and loved you. So, that would become an offer for, gigs. Now, these are guest stars and TV movies, which I don't even know. I guess they do them on Lifetime now. But movies for television, I know you remember them. I remember them. And those were great, But in the series idea, then I guess I entered that phase where every actor in LA gets, which is, okay, now you're auditioning. Now you're, because even though I was getting offers, I still, had to, keep that part of my career going, because people would now call and say, hey, they love you. They want you to come in and meet them. And then maybe from there they'll decide. And that was fine. And I'm an actor that actually loves to audition. I didn't realize it at the time, because the sort of zeitgeist among the actors of my vintage was, most of them, oh, I hate auditioning. Oh, it's, I loved it because it always felt to me, and as I got older, I began to love it even more, because it always felt to me, well, here's a chance to do the thing I love to do in front of a room full of people, which is act. And so I, toured around. I did a couple of I think I played Tom in Glass Menagerie in San Francisco in this period. Excuse me. And loved it. And somewhere around, I think, 92, I think, maybe, the Jackie Thomas show comes up, which was Tom Arnold's show, produced by Roseanne, who was red hot on fire at that point. And her show shot right next door to our studio, so Tom and Roseanne would always interact with each other. And that was a great experience. Paul Feig was on that show. He's now a big director, directed The Last Ghostbusters and a lot of great movies. Just a great cast. And again, made some friends. And that show only lasted for one season. But we had a great, and back then a season was 22 episodes. So that was great. And then I think I had a bit of a, I think there was a bit of a lull maybe. There was, China Beach had that was my first actor's strike over the period of China Beach, because I remember talking about people saying, are you gonna cross the line, and all of this stuff, but I had no idea what people were talking about. So it was either during China Beach or right after, because we were still working and it didn't affect us. But I distinctly remember something about, and by then the rights that people were worried about were VHS. What are we going to do about VHS? That people can rent movies now, or they can rent. Well, they didn't rent TV shows yet, but and we don't get paid for that. And I actually remember, Steve. I actually remember thinking, wow, that's an amazing change from never being able to catch your favorite shows. If you missed it that first time, you had to wait for summer. I tell my kids this, and it's like it's a whole other world. You had to wait for the summer reruns. And probably my son said, "What are reruns?" Right. Now you could record them.
My wife does that. My wife records. I swear, our DVR is full of so much stuff. Like, I'll sit there. She has the Hallmark movies and then the episodic and this, and I'm like, I look and I'm like, oh my God. There's like 3 things getting recorded, but it's great because one, also you fast forward through the commercials. So because we don't recognize, and it's weird because we love Fargo on FX, and they do the long opening, and you're like, oh right, and then all of a sudden, then it's like 8 minutes commercial, 8 minutes commercial, and you're like, oh. Christ. So it makes it good.
Yeah, and we've definitely, I think, as a culture, as a society, when I see something, maybe there's a movie on that I love on, CNN, not CNN, what is it, Turner Classic Movies or whatever. And then when the commercial breaks in, it's almost like, what's that? Well, why am I watching this? And then I'll aim, my remote, and no, there's nothing to, you gotta, if you're sitting regular sort of network TV, you gotta do the commercials. But again, it was sort of similar with VHS, because that was the other thing, you didn't have to watch the commercials. So I think I've been through 3 actor strikes, maybe. This last one was so traumatic. I don't even like to think about it. But so that, again, there was always great. Being on a series is great for of course, money and all of that stuff. But it's also great for helping you get other jobs. Because it then becomes less about. Yeah, you still got to be right for the part in terms of what the director and the producers are looking for. It just sort of puts you at the head of the line to be seen, to be, to go and have those meetings in those offices.
Well, no, how did Arliss and Spin City come up? Because at that time, as you said, you didn't do that. You didn't do, 2 shows. I mean, I just talked to Greg Grunberg, and he was shooting Alias and Felicity at the same time. But that's years later. But for you, how did both these shows come? Because the characters are completely different. I mean, completely different. And I want to talk about your character in Spin City because, it was an iconic character. Because, being gay wasn't out. People didn't talk about it then. But so, what came first, Spin City or Arliss?
Now, you've asked a very difficult question because there is a story behind it, and I have to be careful how I tell the story. My awareness of the show, my first awareness of the show was Arliss. And I had no idea, what this was. It was sports agents. I think my character initially was only supposed to be in the pilot, maybe. So, okay, great. I go Stanley Babson, audition for Robert Wool and whoever else, Michael, oh God, can't remember the executive producer's name. Oh my, he's such a great guy. But, and then, forgot about it. I auditioned, later the audition for Spin City came along. And I didn't have to audition until I met Gary David Goldberg, who was the creator of Family Ties and Brooklyn Bridge, which was such a great show. But Gary he was one of those producers, kind of old school. He was one of those producers who could say, I want this one and that, shut up network, screw you kind of thing. So he was able to bring me in directly to meet him and Michael J. Fox. So I met, and by this point, Arliss wasn't even in my mind because it had been a couple of weeks, So I meet those guys for Spin City, and the way it unfolded for me was I got the call about Spin City first, right? And then later that same day, I believe, I then got a call, hold on, remember that sports show you auditioned for a couple of weeks ago? And I went, yeah, sports agents, something. Yeah, they want you. And I go, but what about Spin City? Now, HBO wasn't new, but, TV series on HBO. I think we were pre-Gary Shandling, for instance. I can't remember the timeline, but now here's a network. Here's a huge star, Michael J. Fox, and it's guaranteed 22 episodes on air. So there was that moment for me of, first, my manager was like, well, you're going to have to make a choice. And no one knew what any schedule was at that point. So everybody assumed it was going to clash schedule-wise. So in my mind, I had decided I was going to go for the network show. And maybe if they were willing to negotiate on the other show, I'd come in for a few episodes, whatever. Then the next thing I hear is, you got both shows. And I said, what? Well, my wonderful agent of the time, he's not my agent now, but he was and is a great agent, Bob Gersh. He did his magic. He did whatever great agents do, and he worked it out. And it just so happened that I think the opportunity he saw was that Arliss was going to shoot in the summer months, and Spin City would wrap for the season February, I think, something like that. So, and I'd even have a little time off in between the gigs. The reason I have this big smile on my face was years later, when both shows were basically, we're not in production anymore. I got a completely different story from one of the executive producers, which sort of led me to believe that Arliss came first in terms of the offer, and my brilliant agent, Bob Gersh, made it happen that which is what an agent's job is, to serve the client, right? And but I didn't hear it until years later from one of the executive producers said, let me tell you, I've been wanting to tell you this I don't know what this voice is I do for producers, because it's like, hey, kid, come on, you're going to be great, kid. You're going to be a star, I tell you. And the producers don't sound anything like that. But Years later, he went, "Boy, your agent's really tough." And I said, "Yeah, he's great, Bob Gersh." And he goes, "Yeah." And and then he tells me this story. We offered you this show first, and I went, "Oh," because I really honestly didn't know, but it worked out. And then I was told I was on this list, like you and Heather Locklear of all people.
Well, now Spin City, when you went for the audition, was it a gay character?
Absolutely.
Okay, so now how, as an actor, do you prepare? Because one, you don't want to go overboard, even though TV at that time was sort of looking at overboard. I mean, it was a different it was a different time. But then you don't want to go too underboard, because then the audience is going to go, this guy's not gay. So how do you prepare as an actor? And how do you prepare to do that role? Is it, do you just, do you just sit there and say, I'm going to go in and be myself? But how do you do that? Because to me, that'd be very challenging, because you don't want to insult anybody, because, if you're auditioning and there's a gay writer and you're overly flamboyant, or they're this or that, they're going to go, that's not gay. Okay. So how did you prepare for that audition?
Such a great question, because there actually is a really great answer to it. I was fortunate enough at the time to have, and listen, when you're in the theater, gay is what? It's nothing. So I, of course, had gay friends, but one particular friend of mine, Jim, was a really kind of classic American gay man story in this regard, in that he was from, I believe, somewhere in the South, might have been Texas, might have been Georgia. He was from Georgia. Fairly affluent family. Father was, I don't know, some bigwig executive down there. And my friend Jim is probably 6'3", great shape, blonde, blue-eyed, totally frat boy type when you look at him. But he's gay and had a partner at the time. And so I started talking to him when I got this part, because I was afraid of exactly what you described. The only other gay black character on TV at that time was the guys from In Living Color, and I can't remember. Oh, Damon Wayans, I think. But they were doing the kind of snappy, And this guy was not that. Carter Heywood was not that kind of a character. And what Gary David Goldberg told me, and he actually told me this later, but it made sense when I figured out his decision process, what made him pick me. He said, what I loved about you immediately was that you brought dignity to the role. And I thought, wow. Well, and even then, even for instance, before I had kids, I was always very conscious of images and the power of images. And particularly as a minority, now we say representation and we say diversity and all those, wonderful words. But back then, it was almost more crucial, because there were so few characters of people of color on regular network shows. I believe at one point Blair Underwood and I were the only two black men on network series regulars on network shows at that time, because he was on LA Law and I was on at that time it was China Beach. Because we talked about it at the Emmys one year. Do you realize it's just the two of us? Kind of thing. So I was always aware, and I didn't want to offend people, but I wanted to be true to the spirit of my friends and the people who I knew who were gay. And so my friend Jim became kind of my, what would I say, almost a mentor in that he gave me some books to read. He said, read this book. And it was, I don't even remember the books now. But he's a lawyer, he's an attorney, and he prided himself on, it's not that he prided himself on appearing straight, but he was concerned, because I was asking him, what do you think? And he was like, well, I hope you're not, this And he referenced those characters on the other show at that point. And I said, no, this guy's, and his background, Carter's background was, college, I believe, football player, which ironically my friend Jim was. I mean, my point is that that Jim for me was the template of this character because he was an All-American. He was the All-American boy, the boy next door, and he's gay. And I think at the time his dad maybe was not good with it. He struggled like many people did and do with coming out and all that stuff. So I some part of me started to think, well, if it wouldn't offend Jim, then it's good, in terms of the behavior. And yet also I wanted to stay true to the character and find those moments where the audience could embrace that this is a gay man, a gay black man in this show that I'm watching, and that maybe it could be someone that they could recognize. So I was always cognizant of honoring that. I think every TV role I've had, every movie role, everything, every theater role, I always want to sort of honor that character, and I don't want to demean if the character is a scoundrel or a villain, and I haven't gotten to play that very often. I played a horrifically evil man on an episode of Criminal Minds, which to this day, I get recognized from that one episode every day. I played a lawyer who was, secretly murdering his daughter's best friends. Horrible, horrible. But so much fun to be a villain. But I wanted to honor that character. I wanted to, I never want my judgment as a human being, as a person, to show through the character. I think an actor's work is to embody the character, move the story along, and not make it any more than what it says on the script and what you and the director kind of work out in that process.
Now, I was going to ask you about Spin City.
Mm-hmm.
How did the gay community take to it? Because
oh my God,
it's sometimes like you talk to people who play a cop and they go, "Oh, cops!" Like Southland, the cops. Oh, this is great. How did they? Because one thing, it was gay representation. As you said, there wasn't a lot of. I mean, I think this was. Did Ellen do the on-screen kiss yet, or was that after? I'm not sure the time frame, but it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't something that was on TV. And so, how did the gay community take to you? Were they happy with your portrayal?
Unbelievable, yes. And still to this day, I got, unbelievable support from the gay community, which made me feel great. I always laugh and joke because, at the time, I would encounter, traveling back and forth between the two cities to work, I encountered a gay man who actually was also black, and he was a flight attendant working the flight, and he leaned down at one point as I was leaving or as I was exiting the plane or something, and he said, "I just want to tell you that I was a little kid in a small town in the South, and I knew I was different from, birth, but I didn't understand what was happening, and I didn't know that there were other people who were like this. And then when I got to be however old he was, 18, 19 or whatever, your show came on, and the gentleman actually said it kept him from killing himself. And the reason I get choked up when I hear that is, or when I think about that is, most actors, it's a job, it's a great part. I love it. I love the money, but we don't realize how that it's still, because I've had since then I've had people more than one person say that to me. Mostly men, but pretty much most exclusively men. I don't think a woman's ever said it, but there's that interesting sort of it's not a division between the lesbian community and the gay male community. I don't know. There's different distinctions. But in my case, it was always a gay man of whatever ethnicity. But when someone tells you something like that, that your work, affects them, kept them alive, it's shocking. It was shocking to me. And I think about, as a TV kid, how TV was, growing up, TV was, for me, TV was real. I knew it wasn't real, but it was real somehow. I don't know. And I was a sci-fi fan. I was into Doctor Who and Monty Python and that kind of stuff. And I remember missing those episodes because there was no recording them at that time, and being crushed for like a week, because then someone would say, "Oh, did you see this week?" And, So then I added just that little angst to, I've never seen anyone like me in the world, much less on TV. And then my character shows up, and this young man said, I was really feeling suicidal, and then seeing your character and the way you play him, made me feel like, oh, there's other people out there like me. I'm not a freak, And it then made, as this gentleman, the flight attendant, told me, he said it made him sort of, open his eyes to what we all know now. Of course, there's always been gay people and bisexual people, but just that thought, he stopped me, which is why to this day I bring up the story, and it still gets me. But because I didn't know what to do with that, you never made. He said, the young man said to me, and you never made fun of us, and you never, you really made it okay to be gay, and in this case, gay and black. I've heard the same thing from gay Asian men, gay Hispanic men, so we're all human, and we all sort of struggle with the same thing. So in terms of a response, I used to say, "Oh my God, I'm a gay superhero," and my friends would go, "What do you mean?" Because I get celebrated everywhere I go. If there's gay people on a plane, and I'm invited to GLAAD every year, and occasionally I still get an invitation to the GLAAD ceremonies and all of that stuff. And nobody's ever been anything but great. I honestly don't know if it could happen today.
Going back to that time, I got to say, when you think about it, when you were doing both shows, what fascinates me is both were very well written. Okay,
yeah.
Both had phenomenal casts. Like Connie Britton's in everything now. You sit there and Sandra Oh, and for an actor,
Arli was in the first 6 episodes, the pilot and the first 6 episodes,
and then Jennifer Esposito was. It's amazing. As an actor, that must be like winning the All-Star game and the World Series in the same year. What was it? What was your mindset when you were sitting there? Because you knew you were going to set, and you said they were both great sets. Every day, you got to not only live the actor's dream of being on a show, which I said in the opening, but you were on 2 shows, and there were 2 great shows. Now I know Arliss no one expected to get canceled because Jim Turner said he had a birthday party set for him, and all of a sudden it got canceled. But what is it like when you're just going back and forth? You have to be the happiest person around.
Yeah, it's true. I was very happy. At the very end of the day, I love what I do. And if I can do it on stage, if I do it in front of a camera, whatever, but I love that process of getting a character, getting it right, I always say. And so I do 9 months on Spin City and laugh every day with, my friends at the moment, Richard Kind, and Alan Ruck and Michael Fox, and then we'd rap, and then it was other friends would go out, well, I'm doing a movie with George Clooney, or I'm doing a whatever, And I go, oh, well, I've got a series. I've got a whole other series to do, And a character that I love. I loved Stanley. I loved Stanley Babson.
What did you love about him?
I loved Carter.
What did you love about him?
I loved his persnicketyness. I loved that he was, I just loved that he was conservative and he was the money guy. And I had so much fun playing him. But I loved Carter because he also had, of course, you bring whatever elements you possess to every role. But I think what's fun is you get to explore your own persnicketyness, for instance. And it just, for me, it just took off like, and when the writers are smart, and they were very smart on both shows, they would see moments that an actor would, create with their words. And if it worked, the great thing, the greatest TV writers I've ever worked with always take what the actor gives, and when it works and it gets a laugh, whether it's in front of a live audience or you crack up the crew on a single camera show, whatever, they go, Boatman's good at that. He's good at wordplay. Let's do some more of that. Or Carter's a neat freak. Let's figure out how to and hence you kind of, in a weird way, it's a collaborative effort to build a character too, because you're doing what the writers create, what they wrote for a character that some writer created. But Arliss was interesting in that it was a single camera show. Both shows, okay, for your audience who may not know, so single camera is your your Law and Order type show, and then Spin City was a sitcom, of course, and we shot in front of a live audience, 300 people every week, which to me was like the best combination of everything. There were real people sitting in the audience, and here I am, but also there's 10 million people out there watching it, because as you said, I mean, the numbers, I believe I want to say the numbers of people that watched Michael J. Fox's episode, I think it was 40 million people watched that show. And normally during our height, I think we averaged 15. Today, that would be a phenomenal success. Because I don't even know if there's a show on TV today on the networks that has 15 million people watching it every week. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But so in that instance, it was like, I not only have these 300 people, but there's a whole other audience out there. But for me, it was still fun to make those 300 people laugh, right? And with Arliss as a single camera show, there was no audience, but we had a great crew who, if funny stuff happened, they'd laugh. And, I wish there were Arliss bloopers. There are Spin City blooper reels around somewhere. I wish there were Arliss bloopers, because the fun thing, of course, about Arliss was we got to curse, we got to swear, we got to drop F-bombs. And
well, with Arliss, as I said, you didn't know it was going off the air. Now, what about Spin City? Did you know Spin City was ending?
Yeah. When the show moved, after Michael retired, essentially, and then, of course, he sort of came back on shows like The Good Wife, and he and I worked together on that a few times, and The Good Fight as well. But after he retired originally, the show moved to L.A., and as you can read anywhere, everyone says, and that's when the show, jumped the shark, if you will. I disagreed, because I think certain elements of the dynamic that Charlie brought to the show were great. Charlie could have been Mike's character as easily, because Gary Goldberg was also a mentor of Charlie Sheen's, because he and Charlie had worked together on something, I can't remember. And he loved Charlie. Always wanted to work Charlie into the show somehow. But I think that what was missing was New York. I mean, the great thing about that show, Spin City specifically, was if you had a scene set in Central Park, we went to Central Park. If we had a scene set in the Empire State Building, we were there. And you can't, there are shots, and the director of photography was a wonderful man, Dickie Quinlan. There are shots from that show that funny thing happens, pull back, and there's the New York City skyline. Wow, there's Michael J. Fox doing the Leonardo DiCaprio, I'm the king of the world, going across the Hudson River on a ferry with Richard Kind holding his legs. And then the camera sweeps up, and there's the New York City sky. That's not a sitcom. That's not even most television, dramas today. Certainly on the networks. But we were told, I got the call from Gary David Goldberg at the end of the sixth season that the show, was not coming back. And, of course, it was great working with you, and we'll work together again. And we did, on a project. But there, it's sad. There's sadness, but sort of in another answer to an earlier question, because of course there's also panic. Oh shit! Well, what am I going to do? Oh, sorry, I swore.
That's fine. And I was going to ask you that question. What were you going to do? Because both shows ended at the same time.
Well, Arliss actually outlasted Spin City by one season.
Okay.
So we got another season of Arliss, which at one point I remember thinking, I can't believe this show outlasted Spin City. Spin City ended in whenever it was. I can't remember, but basically Arliss ended a year later. So there was a comforting thing at that moment. Well, I still have Arliss. I got a whole series I got to gear up for. And that was a great thing. Of course, also, thinking about bills coming. I think by then I had two kids. My two oldest daughters had been born. One literally, I think maybe the third week of production in Spin City, and then the other one had been born subsequent to that 4 years later. So now I've got kids, and, of course there's the moment of, well, now I'll be able to spend more time with the girls and still go off in the summer and hang out with, Jim and Sandra and Robert. So it was a pretty sweet spot to be in, and yes, very unusual, but I was very grateful for it and still am.
So after that, what's your life like? Because you're just on two shows, now you have to get back in the grind. I mean, it must be weird because any actor wants to work. So if you don't have a series coming to you right away, you're going to do guest stars. Well, now you're not top 5 on the sheet. Like for you, you were always... There were of course, Michael was number 1 and Robert was number 1, but it was everyone was together. But now you have to go, and it's not like you walk in and say, "Oh, there's Jim, the cameraman who I've worked with for 4 years." What is that like for an actor? And mentally, what is that like? Is it humbling? And not that you be arrogant about it, because you're not. You're a nice guy. But is it sort of humbling when all of a sudden you walk on the set and it's like you don't have like the trailer that you can leave shit in because you're coming back next week? What is that like for an actor? What was that like for you?
Initially, and I think maybe the first guest star I did was the episode of Quantum Leap, where I played a Vietnam vet. That was post China Beach. So you go on. I think it really depends on the regulars, the stars of the show. I've been told repeatedly, over and over and over again, by New York actors, for instance, you guys, I did the episode where blue, 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 and you guys, I just remember you guys were so gracious, and I was nervous. And I think the great thing about our particular group, Alan Ruck, Richard Kind, of course, Barry Bostwick, and Michael, of course, but Michael was in his own sort of bubble as the star and executive producer, and also what we didn't know at the time was he hadn't become public about his struggle with Parkinson's. So he was away from us a lot, but we weren't sure why. So really it was kind of, with Connie Britton, for instance, and Esposito, we were kind of the core of people who dealt with the sort of more with the guest stars. I guess all I know is people like Jennifer Garner and oh God, I can't even remember. When you're on a show like that, and it's the same thing on shows like Law and Order. When you shoot in New York, you get a pick of great actors, and then as time goes by, you look at an episode and you go, "Oh my God, that's Jennifer Garner." The episode I did with Quantum Leap, I had great scenes with Jennifer Aniston. She wasn't Jennifer Aniston then; she was this actress that I worked with, and we had a great time. She was very sweet, and then I don't know, however many years later, Friends airs, and I go, "Wait, that's that girl from Quantum Leap." But in terms of the stars of the show making the actors feel at home, Scott Bakula was unbelievable. Two of the most gracious people I've ever worked with. He was one, and Christine Baranski on The Good Fight is another. That just seemed to effortlessly go out of their way to make everybody comfortable. And that's of course always a great feeling, because you are nervous, and it's like you're coming into someone's home and you don't know the rules and you don't know the dynamics between everybody, who likes who gets along, who doesn't. What cushions you a little bit is when you are known enough for people to, you go on. And so at least, and this is a very classist sort of stratification of a lot of actors' experiences, I think. A guy who's on for a day, and again, I've been very fortunate in this regard. But when the actors that you're going, whose show you're visiting, know you from your shows, there's a level of comfort that happens, I think, where maybe if the guy who's only working there for a day or for half an hour might not necessarily feel comfortable, talking to the star or whatever. And again, I've always worked with the stars of the shows I've been on have always been nothing but great, which and I guess sort of set a tone for me. Like, let's make people feel comfortable, and then everybody benefits because everybody's performance is better. And
So you've created a lot of these relationships. Now, is that how you ended up on anger management, because of Charlie, or how did that happen? Was that something that Charlie knew you? I mean, because I always say that no matter what you do. Now the big thing is people say networking, and anything you do in your life, you network, and it's just now they make it like, hey, you're a networker. But for you, you're working with those good people. Does anger management happen because of Charlie, or does that get you in the door? What happened with that?
Directly because of Charlie. Charlie and I became, over the run of the last 2 seasons of Spin City, he and I became really close. We got really close, and it's very interesting because Charlie had this reputation of, and this is pre 2.5 Men, but he always had the reputation, bad boy, and all of that stuff. He's one of the just incredibly most generous, spirited people I've ever met. I walked into rooms with him. I've walked into restaurants. We went and actually saw there's just weird is life. I keep using the word serendipity or serendipitous because my career has certainly been full of that. One moment, before I tell you how the gig came along, but Charlie and I had long been friends, and he said, "Hey, let's go see a movie that was hot at the time." It was Tropical Express or something. It was the movie with Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah, Tropic Thunder. Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder. Thank you, Tropic Thunder. So Charlie and I go see this movie. It's a really crazy story, Steve. We're sitting in essentially an empty theater because it was the middle of the day. We start to watch the movies, and in the film, because the film that they're shooting within the film is a Vietnam War drama, both of our characters get mentioned in the movie. in or referenced in like a line Charlie's character had, you know, which is why he was even interested in seeing the movie in the first place, because friends had said, hey, the moment where you and Willem Dafoe, because Charlie was in Platoon. So here's one of the stars of Platoon sitting next to me, who now is one of my best friends. Here's me from Hamburger Hill, and we're both laughing hysterically because there's a couple of times where parts of both movies are mentioned, and you just, what? How does this, you know, happen? But Charlie called me pretty, I want to say, I don't know, maybe, I used to stay with Charlie when I'd go to LA for pilot season. So, geez, I think I did that for about 4 or 5 years. And he was always saying, I want to do another show with you. I want to do a show. I love our chemistry. And I said, yeah, I do too. And so when he got approached by Lionsgate about anger management, he said, I want Michael Boatman. Michael Boatman's got to be a part of it. Michael Boatman's got to be a part of it. And they called and said, hey, you know, we'd like you to, you know. Now, I wasn't a regular on the show, but I was in a lot of episodes as Charlie's best friend, Michael. And just, again, I worked with Martin Sheen on that show. At one point, he was a recurring character, and I was seeing. Now, I had met Martin at I met Martin, I think, at two of Charlie's weddings, and of course, one of the greatest, just a legend for me. And here I am across the set, working with Charlie's dad. Oh, just call me Marty. It's Martin Sheen. What? Okay, Marty. But that was a fun set. But again, strangely enough, I want to say I think another show came along at that time, and I was bounced. Oh, I ended up getting the recurring character I play to this day on Law and Order SVU, Dave Seaver.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know what's pretty amazing, and that segues into my next question. How you did the two shows at the same time we talked about, but then you were on The Good Wife, and then that transferred to The Good Fight, and then you were on Law and Order SUV. I always call it SUV. My wife goes, "No, that's a car." I always say that.
You and I are exactly the same.
But then
I've been on the show.
But then you're also on Law and Order as the same character.
Yeah.
So how does that happen? So The Good Wife, you're on 18 episodes. You get cast.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
And then you get the show ends, and then Good Fight starts, and they say, "We want you." They just come to you. Do you think they wrote that because they really liked your character, or did people like your character? I mean, it's something where, or do they like you? Because it must be weird that you sit there and one show's over, then all of a sudden you have a bigger part on the next show, like the sequel.
Yeah, but playing the same character.
Right.
And one thing about Robert and Michelle King, creators of both shows, The Good Wife and The Good Fight, they love actors. And they really love great actors. So they'd be excited. They'd be just as excited to tell us, oh, you know, who's playing that part? You know, Alan Alda. You know, what? So they called, and they said initially they wanted me for this new show, The Good Fight spinoff. And initially they said, well, the plan for the character at that moment was a recurring character in the first season and then a series regular after that. So, again, yeah. Oh, I know what happened. Somewhere around anger management time and Law and Order time, I also got a series regular on a show that, you know, people our age probably didn't watch, but it was on Nickelodeon, a show called Instant Mom, with Tia Mowry, which again was another one of the great fun experiences and also now I'm number 2 on the call sheet. Wow. feel like I was usually number 4, number 6. So now I'm number 2. Wow, and again, that was created by a great writer, Howard Gould, and a great part. I played a doctor who marries this hot young wife in Tia Mowry, and I have 3 kids, and she's got an instant mom, and hence the title. So much fun on that show. Oh my God. Well, somewhere around, I want to say probably the third and final season of Instant Mom is when the Good Fight started to, because I had to turn down 1 or 2 offers for The Good Wife, because now I'm a series regular on a show and I can't, if they say I can't go, kind of thing. So the Kings called my manager and, we love Boatman and we've got this. Well, it's the same part, Julius. What's great about them, also apart from the fact that they love actors, is they love funny people. They love comedy. And you don't think of The Good Wife or The Good Fight first as a comedy, but there's tons of, humor in both shows. And they love actors who can play both sides of that fence, for sure. And that's what they told my manager, we love Boatman and he's been able to do, So, of course, I said, yeah, I loved working with them on The Good Wife. They were never anything but great. That whole set, Juliana was great. And, of course, there was Christine Baranski. So now Christine Baranski is the star of The Good Fight. And I meet another one of the most unbelievably gracious, wonderful actors I've ever had the pleasure to work with in Christine. This woman walks onto the set. Not only is she, excuse me, hot, she's a dancer. She's elegant, darling. Oh, darling. What would sound pretentious on anybody else, you just love it from her. Oh, darling. Oh, it's wonderful to be here, darling. Oh, and she really means it. She played kind of a bitchy character on The Good Wife. Her character was sort of was the boss, but also, that show ended with her slapping Juliana Margulies' face, right? It made a big deal. So, and I'd worked with Christine enough to know that she was not like her character. She's just incredibly sweet and gracious. But, you never know how people are going to be. And now she's number 1. She's the star. And nope, same person, down to earth. I always know when an actress is willing to come to the set with her hair up in rollers.
Right.
That's a real person. Because not a lot do, and no makeup. And I hope that doesn't sound sexist, but I'm saying, I remember looking and thinking, I've never seen an actress do that, just come sort of, Ashley, we need you on the set for rehearsal. Oh, all right, darling. Hair curlers, just Christine face by itself, no glamour, no makeup, in her sweats. I don't know if anyone in the world can imagine Christine Baranski in sweats, or, they would be very stylish sweats,
right,
of course. But, so they called. So again, I was kind of in the position, almost in a really weird way, with Good Fight, and Instant Mom was over by the time Good Fight actually began. And I did a couple episodes, I think, of SVU.
I always say it wrong. It gets to you. Now, so you worked, I got to ask you now, it's funny, as I looked at you've had such a great career, and you ended up on a show that I only watch occasionally. My wife really got into it during the pandemic, not the pandemic, the writer's strike. Ghosts.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, now that show is funny. Our good friend Rose Abdu did an episode. That's what turned us on to it. But
okay, was
that something they just, because now though, once again, you're playing the Good Wife, and you're an SVU. You're a lawyer, and it's very staunch. You're a staunch lawyer. Did they just come up to you and say, "Hey, you know what? We know you could do," because I know you could do comedy, but how did that come about? Because that show is funny. I mean, that's a really funny show.
It was such a great gig to get because the two executive producer creators are both named Joe, so they call them the two Joes. I can't remember their last names. My manager calls and says, "Oh, the two Joes want you for a guest star, possible recurring character on Ghosts," and I hadn't seen the show either. So I go, "Oh, great! Shoots in Montreal. Okay, it's February. Okay, wow." I grew up in Chicago, and Chicago remains the most vicious winters I've ever experienced. I mean, when you've got sub-zero temperatures and it's completely, and there's no snow. That's, to me, the worst days in a Chicago winter, late winter particularly, are the days with no snow. Because snow it softens everything. It seems to suck up some of the cold. When you look out your window of your house, when I would look out my window and I would just see those bare streets and know that, it's 10 below, but it feels like 80. Wow, it's so brutal. And then there's the wind. And I'm sure everybody has seen those videos of people like having to hold on to ropes as they walk around downtown Chicago. So my manager at the time said, "Okay, so, dress warm because it's cold up there." And I always have the arrogance, "Oh, come on, I'm from Chicago. I mean, nothing intimidates me. New York winters have been mild," and that's not true. There have been a couple that have been pretty harsh, but never as cold, Montreal in the winter, yeah, it's bitter. It's bitter cold. It's bitter. Every night while I was there, I think I flew in on a Friday night, so I had the weekend before I actually started the show on Monday. And I was only in the one scene of the last episode of season X. So I went out. I'm in Montreal. Hey, restaurants, hanging out, bars, whatever. I didn't have any friends there. And at one point, I realized I had bitten off more than I could chew. I hadn't brought a sufficiently warm coat. I'm walking through the streets of Montreal. I get lost trying to get back to the hotel, and it happens to be on one of those Chicago-level cold nights. And I remember thinking, "Oh, this is, the ears are going to fall off. It's all this, the nose freezes together," reminded me too much of my childhood, which is why I don't live in Chicago today. But that was so much fun. And now I had the very weird experience. I've been an actor for 37 years this year, right? I had the very weird experience of walking into, for instance, so you go into the makeup room, makeup trailer, and they usually have pictures of the regulars on the walls. I think, obviously, as reference points for whoever's doing hair and makeup, or who they're working on or whatever. I think also to let the guest stars know, sort of be familiar with who's on the show. Now, I had never seen an episode of Ghost, and in many ways, I had by that time kind of even stopped watching television, movies. Even I'm a writer, so a lot of free time was spent with writing, but also now I have my two youngest were teenagers, so I'm still, of course, a dad and all of that stuff. I have the experience of looking up on the wall and seeing all the pictures and realizing, oh my God, I don't know any of these people. I don't know who they are. Because the reason I brought it up was because the makeup artist, when she was doing my makeup, said, "Oh, well, you've been around so long, you must know somebody in the cast, right?" And I look up and I go, "No, wow." So that was disconcerting. It only got more disconcerting in a good way, but still disconcerting when I walked onto the set and the whole cast in costume was there doing interviews for publicity. And they kind of what is that word? Rushed me, "Oh my God, it's so great to have you here. I'm such a fan. And everyone's saying it. And they're on this huge hit show. Oh, and while, it was incredibly gratifying to hear that, I also finally realized, A, how long I'd been in the business, and B, how old I was. was at one point I looked around, I realized I was literally the oldest person on the set. Directors, producers, and certainly actors.
Well, you've had a great career. I mean, that's the thing. And before we wrap, I got a final question for you.
Yeah.
You've been doing this. You've been on hit shows. You've worked on all-star casts. You've had great relationships.
Yeah.
When the day is done, what do you love about being an actor? Some people, it's like, I do another podcast. I do a business podcast where I have a panel. I talk to different people, and we talk about success. And some the younger guy will be like, well, success to me is the money, and the older guy's like, making sure my kids are okay. That's success to you. Because you've gone through all these days, and you've been very fortunate. You've worked a lot. You started off right off the bat. You got that role. But there's something that keeps you going, because even when people, you're a creative type, and I am also, and you still you worry, But what is it when the push comes to shove? What do you love about acting? I mean, and take as long as you want to answer, because I always wonder, what is it that you just love? Because this acting has created a life for you that most people, maybe 3%, will ever get to experience, like what you've experienced.
Yeah. As I said at the beginning, I'm someone who is fortunate enough to love what I do, and I love it so much that I regularly get kind of enchanted by my friends who are also doing the work that I love to do, and I enjoy working with other actors so much, and making that chemistry work, whether it's as a guest star, whether it's as a regular. The sitcom thing for me was first and foremost the most fun because it was the closest thing to theater. And it's comedy. You're making people laugh. Everybody feels good at the end of a taping, and But I think I've always had this obsession with, the term comes to mind, getting it right. And as I got older and I started to know my way around sets a little more, when I first started, say, on China Beach or even Hamburger Hill, if you thought you did something wrong, I thought, well, that's it. I never get to do that again, and I messed it up. If you're fortunate and a good director happens to agree, I think, hey, I think you can do that scene differently, or try this or whatever. Then it's like, oh God, thank you. Yes, thank you. Well, actually, Robert Wool showed me this, that it's okay to stop and say, hey guys, sorry, can we do that again? That comes with experience. It comes with confidence. I love that about acting in this regard, with regard to my career, that as I've gotten older and more confident and better as an actor, stronger, I believe the greatest performances I've had the pleasure of seeing in my life on stage or on screen are typically by people in their 60s, even older, or 50, whatever, 50. I'm 59, so I'm now in that category. As I was reminded the other day, when someone, a grown man, I was walking into a restaurant, a grown man held a door for me. I'm like, why is this guy holding a door for me? He was like, no, after you, sir. And this guy was in his 40s. Oh, wow, I am that, but I'm happy about that, I'm happy to have this career that I get to mature in and see actual improvements. Now, of course, I'm older, so I can't flip around or, do a lot of physical stuff the way that I could when I was 23 or whatever. But that's good, because now I'm obviously working mostly in television, and it's about small and subtle, but, focused and intentional performances. And I remain fascinated by this work. I used to forget my lines, particularly if I was working with someone like Christine Baranski or God, Audra McDonald on my last show on The Good Fight, but I could easily drop a line because I would be sort of enchanted by what they were doing. Because in my mind, I'm always kind of sort of gauging the performance, my own performance and the performance of the person I'm with, which is a weird place to be when you're supposed to be sort of in the scene. And mostly I am able to be in the scene, but there are some times where I'll go, wow, that was a really good choice. In my mind, oh, she is so good. Wow, I hope I'm as good as she is. I hope I'm doing it. Boatman, it's your line. Oh, sorry. So that's how much I love it. I still make a study of it. I still love watching actors. I think you can, and I wish, and I hope. I saw a production of Sweeney Todd here on Broadway recently that was just tremendous. It was so great. And I was so happy to see the audience. It was a matinee audience. So happy to see the audience was mostly, I would say, high school to college age. And of course there were, older adults there as well. But I saw a lot of kids singing along with some of those songs that I sang along with when I was in college in theater and Sweeney Todd came out. And I thought, yeah, okay, there was a nice sense of continuity there. Because there are sometimes, especially in the current climate and after the strike and everything, there are times when I felt like, am I a dinosaur? Is the kind of acting I do not even really done anymore? And then I'll see one of my great friends, I'll see Don Cheadle, or I'll see, Baranski or something, and go, okay, good. Well, they're it lets me know that I'm okay and I'm a work in progress. So I love that it has obviously allowed me, yes, to live a lovely life. Once I get these last two kids out of college, man, woo! But because that's been hard with this strike. Daddy's definitely had to go into his SEP IRA, to help pay for stuff, which is fine because I'd be paying for it anyway, But that part is almost it's almost the icing on the cake, It's a good cake. I can help my family, when times are good, but I get excited at the prospect of going on that set every single day even on the series I was on, because my experience started out with the self-doubt, I'm a fraud, and trying to cover for that. And then at some point realizing, probably around 40, oh, you're okay. You're not so bad at this, kid, kind of thing. And then having reactions. I did an episode on a show called, I don't even remember what it was. Are We There Yet? The spinoff of the Ice Cube franchise. And I went on for 2 episodes maybe. And the first day I walk on, Terry Crews was the star. And I didn't know Terry Crews at the time. I don't really know him now, but I met him. And I walk on, he's like, oh my God, Michael Boatman. We had a real actor on this show now. And I looked around like, who's talking? Oh, thanks, Terry. I'm recording audiobooks and having just finished a Broadway show, meaning at that point money wasn't great. This is after all the other shows, maybe 2000, something like that, or no, like 2005. Anyway, but he said that, and then the other actor it was sort of a small version of what happened on the set of Ghosts, which was a great feeling. And I think that in that moment, the self-doubt went away. And I had been doing it at that point for 20 years, but my oldest daughter is an actress, and she's working currently. She's in a play off Broadway called Dracula, a comedy of terrors, and she's great in it, and it's a very funny show. But I always tell her, you know, the project itself, yeah, it doesn't matter. Sometimes you'll have to take jobs just for the money. Sometimes you'll say, what the hell am I doing here? But I've always believed, and the actors that I have always respected, and you can see it in their work, I think. I don't care if it's a shitty script. I'm going to do what I can do to make it better, because it's me, it's me up there, and I take pride in my abilities and what I hope the other folks are able to do for themselves, but I can't control other actors. I can only control me. So many times someone has come up and said, oh, I saw you in this movie or this episode or something or whatever. It was terrible, but you were really good. And that's probably the most gratifying, not because it puts other people down in my mind, but because I got it right. You know, I've lived up to that standard I set for myself whenever I actually did. Like, I want to act the hell out of this thing, you know, and I want to walk away from it feeling, yeah, you did your work. You did a good job. You did okay. Because I think I lived so long with the self-doubt and chewing myself up. And did I do it right? And why am I, you know, that to be able to feel acknowledged, you know, by your peers and respected by them is really, really gratifying. And guess what? It happens when I'm doing the thing I love to do. One of the things I love to do the most. Writing is one, and acting is the other. And other than sitting on the beach, which I really love, but I could write and act on the beach too.
Well, that's awesome. Man, I want to thank you for this. Is great. I'm glad we got to do this. Now, what's coming up? How can people get in touch with you? You're not really on social media much, are you?
Not a lot, but I do have all the Instagram, and I'm on Facebook. I'm trying to sort of be more present on Facebook. I just, a short story collection of mine is coming out in 2024, tentatively titled The Midnight Miracle. The Midnight Miracle. Wait, oh my God, I have to remember. It's the story. I wrote the freaking thing. The Midnight Miracle Massacre and Other Stories. And that's going to come out from a small press called Cimarron Street. And there's some other writers there who've published there that I really, really respect. David J. Scow, who wrote The Crow, that movie way back in the day, is one of the greatest, most well-respected kind of dark horror writers ever, and I'm fortunate enough to be friends with him. So that's book-wise that's coming out. I every once in a while, I'm constantly writing short stories and subsequently, you know, selling them and then reworking them and whatever. So I have a short story coming out in a magazine called FIYAH, F-I-Y-A-H, which is sort of about African-American diaspora and writers from that world, queer writers. And so I've got a great story called The Liberation of Brother Buffalo, which is, I'm really, really proud of that story. And so the strike gave me a lot of time to write. And I want to do I've published 3 novels. I've had 3 novels published. There is a big story in my head that I'm sort of still trying to wrap my mind around. So writing has definitely become certainly a priority. Martin Mull, of all people, once told me the only thing, you know, because I was struggling with writer's block. It was on the Jackie Thomas show. And I was talking to Martin Mull, and one of those moments again where I'm going, how am I here? And he goes, the only way to beat writer's block is one way. And I said, what? Sit your butt in a chair and write. That's what he told me. And he's really right. It's really true. He said, even if you write drivel, it doesn't matter. You're keeping the machine going, right? So the actors' strike actually gave me a chance to revisit that. So I've been very productive. TV-wise, I do have the recurring character on Ghosts. I don't know when that starts, because, everything is just actually slowing down for the holidays. But the way they set me up on the show, I'm assuming I'll be back, that's it. I'm waiting for meetings and auditions and to sort of come back in. I turned down a couple of plays, which I would never have done when I started. I said yes to everything. Richard Kind, my friend, actually said to me, "Sometimes it's good to say no." And I said to him, "I would never. Are you kidding? I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for everything." And would go and have a really horrible experience there and go, "Why did I say yes to this?" Even though, again, my mantra would come in and I still wanted to do it, do the best work I could do, So, hoping that sort of comes back as well, the theater gigs and stuff. So very content at the moment, eager for 2024 and following my adult children around who, clearly don't really have time for me. That's been hard, the whole empty nester thing, and sort of realizing, well, of course, they're living their lives.
Right. So people, just Google Michael Boatman. Go on his IMDb. Go watch his shows. He's great. Go find all those old shows. He said China Beaches now. It's great. Go watch that. Watch all of them. People, go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 990 episodes on there. You can email me at coopertalk.net. Twitter, I'm at CooperTalk. Instagram, I'm at CooperTalk1. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.